Hello everyone. The purpose of this video is to discuss Garmin's G3x checklist and the editor for developing a checklist. As the manufacturer and builder of my RV7A, I'm the author of my airplane's Pilot Operations Handbook and Checklists for Operations. As a side note, when I rent airplanes, I typically develop my own checklists. I usually take a picture of the rental aircraft checklist and use that as the baseline for my own checklist. The first time I use a checklist in the rental aircraft, I have an instructor double check the check items to ensure the baseline is complete and correct. I typically add additional information to the checklist, local airport frequencies, and a few nearby airport frequencies. In this video, I will cover development of a checklist from Garmin's checklist editor, installation in my airplane, some usage in my airplane, and then I'll give you a summary of the G3x checklist and its value. Hello everybody. This is a continuation of my look at the Garmin G3x checklist that I have in my airplane. To find the software, what you can do is search on G3x software update. That's what I do because I'm updating my software all the time. And you go to the Garmin page, and this has a lot of different software updates for the G3X and some other equipment that you might have in your airplane. So you have the different GDUs out of the G3X family, and then also different devices. I have a N67RG, so I have the ability to upload its software there, and you can see what the version is and what the date is for update. And then beyond that, if you keep going down the list of software, there are tools. And one of them, for example, is the checklist editor, and that's really what we're focusing on in this video. There are other tools here, ability to convert your flight logs for aviation. There's some survey tools for the GMU44, and then there's actually a PC tool for the GTX 3X5 family. After you've downloaded and installed the software from Garmin, you'll bring up the software, you'll bring up the executable for that, and you're able to go into that. It'll be blank whenever you first bring it up, and then you can start a new checklist through that. I have one already created for my RV7A, and I basically gave it my N number, and it's a .ace file, and as I mentioned before, that goes on the SD card for the particular GDU you want to have the checklist on. So on my primary flight display, I have that on the root directory of that SD card, and the system automatically finds it and then brings it up in the aircraft as I showed. But to create the entries for these, there are groups, and I only have one group at this time. I plan to do emergency procedures. I'm not creating that at this moment because I want to test it for a while before I go put in all the effort to put in additional information. And I'm trying to determine whether or not this is truly a good tool or not. And I think it is. And there's several reasons why I believe that. I use checklists religiously, but there's a point in your flight where they get set down. They'll either be put in a holder in the aircraft, or they'll be put between the seats, and then you've got to go find that at a particular time. And sometimes it might be difficult to find the right checklist for the right time, and the ability to have that on your primary flight display that you can bring up within just a few clicks of the buttons is really nice. And then you can bring up specifically which one you want fast. And in an emergency, that's important, but it's also important in flight when you're trying, things get busy in the aircraft, you get under a lot of load, then I think it really helps to get you a checklist quickly and makes that more efficient. And that's all good. That's time savings. That's confusion saving. There's lots of goodness in that. To go over just briefly what you do to create these things, you'll notice up here in this upper left corner of the screen that there's basically a file type list of everything. And then each checklist, so you have your group at the top, and then each checklist has its own title. And the way you get those is you can go anywhere in here. It depends on what order you want them in, but you could go anywhere and you could add a checklist to a new location above what you're clicked on. When you open up a checklist, what you'll notice is that each of these is sequential, and you really can't tell what it is through the file view. You have to look at each item's properties in order to know how it's going to look over here to the right. So you can have just text, and you can use different justifications to make things stand out. The different colors are for the different types, and the little checkbox shows you where it's going to be checked. So if we go look at the very first entry, which is pre-flight itself, I could create a new one, or I'm going to edit the properties, and it's real simple that you just give it a title, something that makes sense. Then this external title that's up here at the top is another one that I've added. And then if you look at its properties, or again, you can add a new one, you'll notice that I called it a subtitle. And basically the response section is ghosted out, or you're unable to make entries into that field. So it's helpful there to tell you what it is. And then there's the justification over here, and there's a lot of levels of justification to format this and make it look different. So you make it a subtitle, you give it a name, and you're done. And as you go down, you get to your first checklist item. And if you add a new one, you can call that a challenge. So the challenge are like your regular checklist items. And in this case, you have the challenge of exterior control locks, and then the response is remove. And you can see from the display that it puts that up there, puts a bunch of dots, and goes over to the title over there. And in my other video, or the one that I merged with this, you'll see that how it looks on the display, and it compresses it if it needs to for the display. But real easy to make these entries and do simple checklists. This is indented to level 1, and as you can see on the screen, that gives it an offset. And then you'll notice midway through, and it looks like all the other entries as I've mentioned, but here's cabin, and it looks different, and it helps tell you these are external items. These are things you check in the cabin before you go to engine start. They're really neat. Some other information that I put in here that with a paper checklist, you don't see very often, or I've never seen it. But what I did is I put in here the VFR requirements. So if I'm in doubt, what tomato flames is, I don't have to keep that memorized. I have it in here, but then you can just look at the checklist and go through and make sure you've got all these items before you go do a VFR chart. I think that's very valuable. And again, as I mentioned out at the airplane, I plan to take my compass card and have one of these that's compass card, and then you open it up and it'll just have text information that shows you for each angle or each heading, what is the error for that heading for the compass. I think that'll be very useful, and I don't have to have a sticker up on the compass. As you go through your checklist, you get down to the bottom and you're finished. And you make that will make it an ACE file, and you can take it out and put it on your aircraft as a ACE file at the root directory of the SD card and the primary flight display. Like, you could put it in the MFD. I'm sure I haven't done that. And there you go. All right. Going to go through the brand new checklist that I put in to my RV7A. So anyways, lots of things are failed. I'm on external power in the hangar. And so things aren't really running, but I want to go through the checklist real quick just to see how they look on the G3X. So as you get to your main pages, now I got a message here, and again, that's part of being on the power. The servos are not functioning correctly, so that's okay. But if you look along the bottom here, you'll see that there are charts and then waypoint information, flight plan information, weather, terrain, traffic, SiriusXM info, and then check. So here's the checklist, and the first one that's up here is a pre-flight, and there's groups. I only have one group right now, so I think that's why it's ghosted out. But if you select that, then you get all your different pre-flight or your different checklists you have for normal operations. So I have pre-flight, engine start, pre-taxi. I have VFR required equipment, IFR required equipment, taxi, and run-up. So I thought these were a good idea just to be able to go through and do like tomato flames and stuff and verify. Seems like a really good way to do a checklist that I've not seen before. So it has all the stuff, tachometer, oil pressure gauge, and I put in information to try to clarify stuff. So anyways, it's got the nighttime information, but I thought that was a great idea. So we'll go back to pre-flight, and the information that I put in, and I broke it up into categories. So there's the external pre-flight, and then basically you just go through and you just press the button in on here to check. So check, 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 check. And it goes right down through the checklist, and you can kind of read them off and do this for yourself. I think this is a really good thing to have for these airplanes that have the panels like this. So when you're done, then you go to your next checklist. You have your engine start, and then of course there's pre-taxi, and then taxi, and then run up. So before you go out and start taxiing, I thought that's a good idea to remind yourself that there's VFR requirements and that there's IFR requirements. Just a nice little thing to have. So anyways, the way that I did this, there is a program that you can download from Garmin. It's an EXE that you can run on your PC, and you can go set all this stuff up. And then it's an ACE file that goes on the SD card that's plugged in here. You just have it on the root directory of that drive, and boom, it's just right there. It goes out and reads it, sets it up, and really good thing. So anyways, I thought I would just cover for the G3X a little bit about checklists. I've never used this, but I'm planning to use it in the future. I've always been a take your panel type of thing. And I think I'll probably add in there a compass correction checklist, and really it'll just have these angles and what the correction is for it. Instead of having a compass card, which is kind of a pain to get on there, I keep it on the checklist, which is right with me, so I can do all the compass corrections if I never need to. I never have to, of course, because of all the glass and all the different ways of navigating, but I think you are required to have that in the aircraft. So this is my method, and I think I'll have it on here. And I'm going to explore having Garmin Pilot and seeing if I've got to reproduce all these or whether I can transfer them over. And then the same thing, if I can have that little compass card thing in there, that would be great as well.
So, we're going to go over and try our brand new checklists. Hopefully I can get my camera straight here. Okay, external control locks, fuel quantity, sump tanks, surface bolts, fuel caps, tires, engine oil, inlet, prop, exhaust, tow bar, cabin, failure plan, passenger brief, own harness, passenger harness, control, oil door. Got it pulled out this morning. Interior control locks. Yep. And the flaps are up. Alright, that's pre-flight. Already done the engine start. Almost forgot the fuel selector. That, brakes are good. Started. Voltage. Yep, we're good. Current, we look great. I'm going to go ahead and flip on the secondary battery. I don't know if you can see that, but the secondary battery's taking a little bit of a charge. Went from 11 amps up to 32, was 35. Okay? As expected. Yeah, we're leaned at about an inch, but I do it based on the rise in RPM. Okay. Alright, we're at the end of engine start, pre-taxi. We don't have any CAS messages. We do have a set baro indicator there. So we'll go ahead and get the weather.
Condition clear. Temperature 13 Celsius. Dew point 00 Celsius. Altimeter 299.7. Remarks. Density altitude 1,200.
West Plains Regional Airport.
Automated weather observation.
Natchez field elevation.
0 Zulu. Wind variable at 03. Visibility 10. Sky condition clear. Temperature 13 Celsius. Dew point 00 Celsius.
Okay, we got that. So CAS is gone. Radios were tuned. We got the weather. We set the baro. We're 54 right now. We don't need to set the pitot. Alright, I'm going to take off on runway 36. I already know the taxi route. Brakes are tested. Canopy is closed and latched. Because it's a little cool out. Okay, autopilot test. So we snap our heading bug. And then we go to heading mode. We turn the autopilot on. We turn it a little bit left. Then we observe the stick. Snap it back to center. Go right. Then went right. Snap it back. VS. Down. Up. And autopilot disconnect off the button there, and we're free and correct. Flight director off. So we'll go through that, snap the heading, autopilot was on, verified roll, verified VS, we did the disconnect, and they're free and correct. Got it.
West Plains traffic, helicopter 723 Victor Charlie.
Alright, our trim is a little bit off there.
Positioning from west to east.
Back to the center-ish.
1,600.
So we verified the trim. We don't have a flight plan, we're just going out for fun. Alright, altitude. Let's go ahead and set that for... let's set it for 4,500. We'll go off west just a little bit. Heading doesn't matter right now. Alright, I know what I'm going to do on takeoff. I'm not producing power. I'll stop the runway. And that's it. So pre-taxi's done. And we can do the verified, we have a tachometer. We got oil pressure showing. 62 psi. We got oil temperature showing 106. Manifold pressure's good. Temperature gauge for outside air, we're 54 degrees. Okay, we've got an airspeed indicator. Assume it's good. We'll find out on the runway. We got an altimeter. We got a magnetic compass. We have our strobe lights are on. And we have fuel gauges showing here. And we don't need a landing gear. ELT is on and armed. My seat belts are good. We're not going over water. We're not going at night. So we're done.
So in these videos, I tried to cover number one, how to install the editor and use it, how to build a checklist for a G3X. Then number two, I wanted to show how to install that in the aircraft and point out, where the SD card goes in the G3X and where the ACE file sits. And then finally, I wanted to show a little bit of operations of the checklist. And it turns out that this was really the first time I used the checklists, and I didn't know how useful the electronic version would be. And so, in summary, at first thought, I thought that the G3X checklist would eliminate the need for a printed checklist, and that didn't happen. There are a lot of things to check before engines start. And since the screens are not available, it's still nice to have the printed checklist to verify things that could impact having to get out of the seat of the aircraft, shut the engine off, or it could cost you some time. So it's nice to have the printed checklist where you can walk around the aircraft. And the best I can tell, there's no commonality between G3X checklist and the Garmin pilot checklist. And maybe in the future Garmin will tie these together, but for now it would appear that the Garmin pilot checklist is tied to flightplan.com and doesn't read ACE files. Again, it would be nice if it would, and you could have a common checklist between the two, but in the end it's pretty easy to work around that. I don't really need an extra checklist, and as my backup I kind of like the printed one. In the end, I get the redundancy I like to have, which gives me some comfort when I'm flying, and I think it adds safety. The G3X checklist is a real safety enhancement in my opinion, especially given emergency situations or high workload situations. You can just reach up and find the checklist so much easier up on the screen than you can digging around trying to find where you laid the checklist, while you were flying cross country or something like that. So for that reason alone, I'm glad I took the time to learn how to create one and put it in my airplane. I think that it's nice that the G3X has that capability and that Garmin put the editor together for it. I hope you find this video to be useful. I will say never forget to use common sense when implementing new ideas or procedures in flying. It's always a good idea to consult your CFI. Think safety first always, is what I say. Well, thank you all.